What's up, Rangers Nation? It's Alex Blink with Dallas Sports Fanatic, and this is the Texas Rangers Fanatic Podcast, episode 18. We are in 2021. I hope, well, I don't want to say I hope everybody had a good 2020 because that obviously didn't happen, but I hope everybody had a good New Year's Day, and I am joined from the northern side, Mr. Ken Schultz, who is my go-to Cubs guy, and there's a reason for this. Okay, how's it going?
Because I've wasted my life. Is that where we're going here, Alex?
Well, we have something. The Cubs and the Rangers have something in common. We both got to witness a Yu Darvish trade. That we feel like at the time the team Darvish was on got gypped.
A little bit, yeah. It's the kind of thing that it's going to define this Cubs off season. And certainly is going to define the first couple of years of Jed Hoyer's tenure as the team president of the Cubs. And we were kind of in the lead up to recording. I was starting to get revved up in my venom for the Darvish trade. So yeah, we can dig into that a little bit. So here's the thing, is that I can believe that trading Yu Darvish right now is not the worst idea in the world. That he's a 34-year-old pitcher coming off of far and away the best season of his time with the Cubs, and probably one of the best seasons of his career, at least since his early Rangers days. He was legit one of the top two, if not the best pitcher in the National League last year. So looking into this offseason and realizing that there has to be a little bit of a minor league restocking going on, I could at least logically get the idea that, okay, you're not going to get a better return for Yu Darvish than you are right now at this moment, especially from a team like the Padres, who are desperate to chase down the Dodgers while their window is open. However, if your idea of peak value for Yu Darvish is Zach Davies and 4 teenagers, which is definitely the worst boy band concocted in the past 20 years, then in a neutral context, the response should be, okay, you're fired. Now, I know this is not a neutral context, and Jed Hoyer should not be fired yet, but that's the kind of thing where as soon as you get that deal, you go, well, we know we got screwed. The best case scenario is maybe 4 years down the line, we'll feel less screwed than we do now.
I look at it from the perspective of back when the Rangers and the Dodgers made the deal for Yu Darvish to go to Los Angeles. And you think about back in 2017, let's be honest, from a Rangers perspective. And first of all, they got AJ Alexy and Brandon Davis. Okay.
Hey, those are two names.
But they also got Willie Calhoun. And I don't think a lot of fans really know exactly who Willie Calhoun was at that time. And now, 3.5 years later, you see the type of capability that he has. Now, I don't know if any of those 4 teenagers are going to go on to a successful solo career like One Direction. But you feel like there's always that possibility. And so whenever these trades are made, I always like to kind of take a step back before I say, let's exit out and say this was a dud from one side or the other, and just let the deal develop, especially when you're dealing with young minor leaguers, because you never know what they're going to turn into and what capability that they have of just developing. So who knows? Maybe the Cubs got a couple of big names into the future. You never know on that.
That's certainly the hope. And prospect heads say that, yeah, athletic skills-wise, some of these guys are impressive. But, I mean...
optimism is a 2021 New Year's resolution of mine.
Absolutely. I mean... That might be all we've got left at this point. Continuing existence is mine, by the way. So, so far so good. 7 days in. Let's knock wood for 8. But I mean, even in terms of performance, we don't have much to go on because the minor league season being canceled last year, almost every one of these guys but one, I believe, does not even have a statistical record that we can measure at this point. So it's really just kind of hoping that your scouts and the reports that you get and your ability to scout video are good enough to maybe pick out a diamond or two in the rough. What's really going on is that the Cubs are trying to restock their farm system with some depth. that they have a couple guys at the top end between guys like Miguel Amaya and Brennan Davis. And they still consider Nico Horner a pretty decent prospect, even though last year he had like one hard hit ball the entire season. And that's not exaggerating. That is, he had exactly one hard hit ball during the entire 2020 season. But there are still skills and tools there. But in terms of building up a system where it's one guy after the other that arrives in kind of the waves that we saw in 2013 and 2014 leading into the magical 2015 and miraculous 2016 seasons, yeah, they're nowhere close to that. So they're trying to build up something resembling that right now. The problem with that philosophy is that right now, they could still very much be in a contention window. Were they actually concerned about going for it? But the weird thing about being a Cub fan these past 3 or 4 years is that even though they're still in a contention window, we have not had like an actual off season since maybe, 2016. Actually, no, 2018 since we signed Darvish. But the Cubs have not signed a position player in free agency outside of Daniel Descalso, who barely counts, since Jason Hayward's contract in 2016. So that's not the way.
Welcome to rebuild. Well, yeah, I wouldn't say
it's not a rebuild. It's a rebuild of choice. It's a rebuild of choice. It's not a rebuild of circumstance.
I mean, yeah, I guess you're right on there. It's not quite. They haven't reached the Rangers level of rebuild yet.
Right. Right. They don't have to do it. Like the Rangers have had bottoming out where you had to go, well, we've got no choice but to stock up again. The Cubs have not bottomed out since 2013. And especially in a division where literally no other team is trying to compete right now, there's no reason to bottom out and rebuild. But again, that is the choice that they're making as an organization, and it's incredibly frustrating to watch.
At 34-26 last year through 60 games, if you played 162 games, do you think they make the playoffs? Do you think they win that division in 2020?
They do not win the division. Are you giving me expanded playoffs in this scenario like they had last year?
No. Let's say regular format.
I think in regular format, Cincinnati takes the division, and I would not be surprised to see the Cardinals catch them at some point from behind and pass them up. What happened with the Cubs last year in terms of winning the division, which believe me, I celebrated. I'm glad that they did. Those 2 days in the playoffs, while they sucked, they were at least 2 days that they were in the playoffs. That counts.
2 more days than Ranger fans got to celebrate.
Yeah.
But then we get the number 2 pick in the draft, so.
But what happened with the Cubs last year is that they jumped out to a 13-3 start to the year and then played a couple games under 500 for the rest of the season. So they kind of jumped the rest of the division, and then because it was the small sample of a short season, they were able to ride that out entirely for the rest of the year. But over the course of a long season, the major flaws that we kind of saw by the end of the year, especially revolving around a high strikeout, no contact offense, would have been severely exposed. And over 162, that wasn't tenable.
Oh yeah, I mean, I just remember those 2 games. Miami just blew right by the entire offense for 2 days.
Yeah, it's really something to watch. A team that was such an offensive juggernaut just 4 years ago. I mean, now the scouting report on the Cubs, especially someone like Chris Bryant, throw fastballs down the middle. It was like he couldn't solve it for almost the entire year, which leads me to believe that there was almost definitely an injury involved somehow. But still, just watching, I mean, you could tell him a fastball was coming, and he still worked the counts. Like he still had strike zone judgment, but when he got his pitch, he missed for almost the entire season.
Yeah, I mean, and I think as far as anytime you're dealing with it, it has to be injury related, especially if you go straight from previous years. And that strike zone recognition, I mean, that never goes away. If that's one of your fortes, even if you're severely hurt, your eyes aren't hurting.
Yeah, I mean, he has not lost the skills that he came up with in terms of batting eye, and he still can work the counts. He can still draw walks. And yeah, as I say, it was just such a bizarre experience to see him get it to 2-0 or 3-1, and then here comes your pitch, and nope, nothing at all.
Do you think the Cubs essentially clean somewhat more of a clean house? I'm hearing Wilson Contreras is on the market. I'm hearing Chris Bryant's on the market.
Yeah, it's it's not going to stop here. We know that Ricketts is in full salary dump mode at this point. That I think Bleacher Nation, one of our Cubs blog army's like most prominent contributor, I think listed that there's something like $75 million in salary have already been shed based on contracts last year into this year. So it's already huge. But yeah, I would not be surprised to see somebody like Wilson or KB go this offseason. It feels like a little bit like that they're trying to identify who their like long-term core guys are that are going to be leading the next group of Cub prospects into what they hope will be their next contention window, rather than concentrating right now. And it certainly seems like it's going to be Anthony Rizzo and Javier Baez. Now, I mean, given what Ricketts is doing, I could easily see them at some point just saying being jettisoned or unsigned as well. But that's kind of the sense that you just kind of get following the Cubs this offseason, is that they're going to like create a small core four of Hendricks, Baez, Rizzo, and then Hayward because of his already existing contract. And then, yeah, they could certainly trade Chris Bryant if his value becomes tradable again. And if they get a package for Contreras that blows them away, because I think that they have real hopes for catching prospect I mentioned earlier named Miguel Amaya, who has been lighting it up in winter ball during the offseason. He's one of the rare highlights of this Cubs offseason is just seeing random clips of him just crushing it in winter ball right now. So they've had catching depth in the system for a while, and that's one area where I could see them taking advantage if someone offers them a package for Contreras that blows them away. But yeah, it would be just a huge loss to the big league team if they were to jettison Contreras this offseason.
It's so interesting because, as you mentioned, a youngster raking it up in winter ball, similar to what Texas is having, and an MVP award at the Dominican Winter League for Ronald Guzman, who, I'll be honest, not quite sure. I mean, the Rangers acquired Nate Lowe from Tampa Bay. So the question this offseason and going into spring training is, what do we do with Lowe? What do we do with Guzman? I mean, you're going to does that raise his trade value? Or do you see what he can do during the spring training? So I feel like there's some similarities in regarding youngsters that are delivering. And like I said, the Rangers and the Cubs situations are different, but surely meshed in a lot more closer than they were last few years.
I would venture to guess for a team in the position where the Rangers are now that you can certainly bring both guys into spring training and heck, even probably start the season and figure out a way to rotate the lineup or play both of them, move one down the defensive spectrum somewhere, just to see, the Rangers are in a position where you can evaluate guys in the big league level and determine, okay, like this is a guy that we can build around versus this one we might be able to jettison for prospects at this point and live with it.
I know there was talk about like the Detroit Tigers possibly, or maybe the Milwaukee Brewers. I don't know how true those are, but in regarding to, yes, Lowe could probably play third base, or if you want to DH Lowe, because I'll be honest, the only thing that's holding Ronald Guzman back is his offense. Because defensively, he's one of the, I know Anthony Rizzo is a good first baseman, but the ability that Guzman has at first and the way he picks the baseball at first is someone that I haven't seen in a long time. But then again, Rizzo's offense totally triumphs, which makes him a better all-around first baseman.
Well, yeah, Rizzo is pretty much the whole package except for running, and even then, and Rizzo also brings, he's the greatest leadoff hitter of all time, the greatest relief pitcher of all time. So yeah, he brings you everything.
Todd Frazier may want a word with that.
ERA of 0. Bring it. ERA of 0.
Todd Frazier may have want to give Rizzo a little bit run for his money.
It's in leadoff hitter or pitching? It's
pitching.
Oh yes. So okay, yeah. Like Rizzo has thrown 2 pitches and has done the job. Like in terms of pitch to out efficiency, you can't get much better than that.
No. I mean, I'll give it that. Hey, any way you get out, if it takes 1, 2, 10, you get the out, that's all good.
Yep. Now,
Although I would think that you wouldn't want to see Anthony Rizzo on the mounds.
No, Rizzo spent the better part of 2 or 3 years at Joe Maddon's side every time the Cubs were getting blown out, saying, yeah, let me pitch, Skip, let me pitch, Skip, let me pitch. So I think it was 2019, in one blowout, Maddon finally said, okay, you got this. And Rizzo got in the mound and realized, oh, shit, that's what this involves. And he said afterwards, yeah, never again. So
everybody wants to see, and I do want to see it myself, because I'm trying to think. I don't think there was any from the Rangers last year that they had a position player pitch, unless I completely missed it. But I do know that fans want to see, and I don't think it's ever going to happen, Joey Gallo take the mound, because he was, and I don't know if you ever heard the story, but Joey Gallo was actually originally recruited to be a pitcher, but he didn't want to. And so when he was previously recruited, I believe it was the Blue Jays that wanted to recruit him as a pitcher.
That's got to be something to have just that much baseball skill, where someone says, yeah, we want to,
because his dad was a former pitcher.
Yeah. We want to draft you this way into our system. And you go, I would prefer doing the other thing and then become an all-star at that other thing.
It's amazing. I believe, and I have to look, because this was something I did a couple years ago, and I can't believe it's, like I said, it's been 2 years, feels like 10 years. Mm-hmm. So, but I believe his father was a former pitcher for the Montreal Expos, or at least in the Expos organization. Yeah, because I know Chris Bryant's dad was a part of the Red Sox organization.
Right. Yeah, Chris Bryant's dad was a minor leaguer in the Red Sox organization, and learned most of his hitting philosophy from when Ted Williams would come in and do guest instruction. And really, you can't get better than that in my book, in terms of, if you're gonna take from someone, take from the greatest hitter who ever lived. That seems.
And if you're in the Las Vegas area, you can learn pitching from Joey Gallo's dad. I believe his pitching instruction is still open.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm trying to remember it. Is there a Bill Gallo from the Expos? I don't really recall a Gallo playing for the Expos, but that's incredible. And I
learn everything every day.
Yeah, and I wonder if when they were growing up, if they learned from each other's dads too, because
that's exactly. That's exactly. They had a little league squad between Joey Gallo, Chris Bryant, and then Bryce Harper was in the mix.
Right, and Bryce Harper nicknamed Chris Bryant Silk, right? Because he was smooth as. And that's, that's ball player wit, I guess. But
oh, by the way, I may have misspoke on there. It was Joey Gallo's brother that was part of their little league team.
Oh, okay.
So close enough. Uh-huh. You learn from your brother. Yeah.
Yeah.
But boy, that's quite a combination, don't you think?
Oh yeah.
On the same little league team.
I mean, can you imagine being like the kid?
To be the opposing team.
The kid who was on, just like on all little league teams, the kid who's on the wrong side of puberty, going up against 2 future MVPs and a future home run champion. Yeah. That would not be, oh God. Like, just surviving that would be a skill, I think, that you could take for later in life.
And the Cubs not only made a change as far as Darvish being gone, I do want to bring up Victor Caratini being gone, but that's probably just Darvish's personal. Was he really Darvish's personal catcher?
Yes, and there was a real difference in the way Darvish attacked hitters when they switched from Contreras to Caratini. That there was early on some tension between Contreras and Caratini, because Wilson has game face on 24/7, and if he's upset with something, he will let you know. That's one of the things I love best about him. Wilson is great. Caratini, it seemed like. And I don't know what exactly his skill was, but I think just receiving Darvish's array of pitches better. And he was, for the better part of his time at the Cubs, a much better pitch framer than Contreras ever was, although Contreras has caught up to that substantially in the past year. So I think that helped with Darvish. But in addition to being Darvish's personal catcher, Caratini can also swing the stick a bit. Like, he's not going to be an all-star by any means with the bat, but in terms of, especially the way most catchers operate now, he will give you value. He has good strike zone judgment. he also has good contact rate, I think, which in today's game is paramount.
Pretty good.
Yeah. So like he can give you some sneaky underrated value in addition to guiding the best pitcher in the league through his starts.
I know pitchers and managers, they usually downplay it and say, oh, no. There's no real difference. But I mean, if you're a Ranger fan in 2019, you can definitely tell based on the way Mike Minor pitched with Jeff Mathis than he pitched with Isaiah Kiner-Falefa or whoever else that brought it behind the plate. Like, it was strictly Mike Minor, Jeff Mathis. And it's understandable because as much as people want to rake on Jeff Mathis is a pretty good defensive catcher. And he's really good at calling the game.
Jeff Mathis has an overall positive WAR value. And for someone who hits like he does, that's a miracle.
That's amazing. And that goes to show you how good he is behind the plate.
Yeah.
You put up that sort of offensive number and you have a positive WAR value.
Yeah, it also shows just how important defensive skills are in catching and in terms of how much they contribute to winning a ball game too. Like I've long thought, ever since the days back in the Cubs days, this is an old school name I'll drop on you, when they had a catcher named Michael Barrett, who is
I remember Michael Barrett.
Yeah, who is most famous for punching AJ Przinsky in the face and living out every single big leaguer's dream come true. Michael Barrett was a really good hitter, like someone who hit you probably somewhere in the 260, 270 range with about 15 to 20 home runs, who was
I remember he had some pop. I didn't remember he had like some amazing pop. I felt like he was pretty average.
Oh, yeah. And for a catcher, someone who gives you average bats, like that should be a really valuable player. But I also remember, like, the second Lou Piniella became Cub manager and kind of saw what he had, like he took that for about a month and then was in the general manager's ear. You could tell to saying, get me anybody else. I don't want this guy catching my pitchers. Like, and they went through like the Jason Kendall's corpse. They went through a guy named Coy Hill, who this is 100% true, had cut off 3 of his fingers in an accident the previous offseason and had to have them restitched on. And that was a guy Lou Piniella preferred over Michael Barrett because he could catch the ball. So that to me tells you. I
remember that story. I think I do remember that story.
Yeah, like Coy Hill had lost like several of his fingers and had to have them replaced. And he was still preferable to all 10 fingers of Michael Barrett. So that to me was the lesson from, one of the most innovative old school baseball guys ever, telling you, hey, this is what catcher defense means to a team. And ever since then, I've been like, yeah, I will go defense first in that position 9 times out of 10.
Or your favorite catcher of all time, Yadier Molina.
Ugh, God. Yeah.
I know. Hey, I know what to say to Cubs fans.
Yeah. Are you going to throw a Hall of Fame at me and get into this discussion? I've already had so much to rage over the past 2 days. Why do you bring this up, Alex Flink?
I am just going to leave it as
going on.
I'm just going to leave it as
Yadi is a very good player. Yadi is definitely a contributor to a world champion team. I can give you that. Yadi is not what he is not is a Hall of Famer. I will, and the stats back me up 100% on this. That if you're going to argue Yadi is a Hall of Famer, you are going to lose this argument.
Oh no! I'm just going to say Yadier Molina and move on.
Yeah, move. Really, I would be if everybody in baseball said that, it would make things so much nicer in general. Yadier Molina, move on.
I mean, I didn't say he was a Hall of Famer or not, but I just figure we'll decide that later on.
It's any time the Cardinals play on national TV, that's when an announcer like Joe Buck tries to show that he knows inside baseball. They go immediately to that talking point, and then you go, yeah, you don't really pay attention to anything, do you?
It's either Yadier Molina or Game 6 of the 2011 World Series.
Like I didn't
take your pick.
That. You brought that up yourself.
I'm just saying those are like the 2 major topics. That always get brought up.
We both shared pain that night. I will definitely give you guys the lion's share of the pain on that, but we felt it with you, believe me.
I'm so glad you guys can sympathize with us.
Yeah, anytime the B-fib are you know, living in their glory is a dark time for America.
So the Cubs didn't just make a change as far as pitchers go and the lack of GM. They also made a booth change as we move away from Joe Buck and we move into the Cubs booth. So first off, you're one of Marquee. How was that?
Awful.
I figured.
Yeah, it was.
I almost want to see if there's somebody who lived in Los Angeles and that moved to Chicago who got because I heard Sportsnet Los Angeles was a pain too. So I almost wanted to like, is it as bad or is it worse or is it not as bad? Because I heard that was treacherous as well.
Oh yeah, and the big problem with Sportsnet is you couldn't see it, and the Cubs almost had that problem until like right before.
Well, we got 2 months left, and nobody can, and about 90% of Dallas area can't see the Mavs. They can't see the Stars. Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't heard that. Jeez, that's awful.
Because of a dispute going on between Sinclair and
oh yeah.
So I think only if you're a cable subscriber.
Yeah.
That's it.
And Marquee's a Sinclair station too, and I'm a cord cutter, so I'm gonna have to figure out next year how to.
Why am I not surprised?
Oh God, yeah. Like anything the Ricketts can do to spread a little more pain in the world, yeah.
Normally, I would agree with you as far as the Ricketts, but I think that's also a Sinclair thing.
Like if the Ricketts could arrange it so that they could televise lethal injections of immigrants on Marquee, like that would be the only off-season programming you'd see there. And so Marquee started actually during last off-season during the Cub convention, where Tom Ricketts starts that every off-season with a dig me speech to kind of kick things off, where he goes out and then just kind of name checks every player and pretends people are applauding for him. And he got
kind of like Rob Manfred.
Oh yeah. Like there's 100% correlation between why Rob Manfred is chosen as the figure to lead this particular group of baseball owners. Like that kind of awful personality, like, yeah, that's the only kind of people who can live with each other are baseball owners and Rob Manfred, it seems like. But Ricketts during the speech was going through like all the innovations you're going to see this year. And he then dropped the name Marquee Sports Network, and everybody in the room just let out boo. And there was one brief moment where you could tell he was completely unprepared for this. And you could see in his eyes the shock of a man who's had his entire life handed to him on a silver platter, having to briefly deal with the consequences of the choices he made. And it was a thing of beauty, just like 2 brief seconds of accountability. Like that's literally the only 2 brief seconds of accountability Tom Ricketts has had in his entire life. But they were right there for everyone to see. And you could inject that into my veins, man. Like, and that was like the fans letting him know. And it was mostly because of the carriage dispute that they had with their cable companies. And most people thought that they weren't going to get the Marquee network. And then when they did, and they realized, oh yeah, you really didn't think this through in terms of what you were putting on there. Like the best part about Marquee was the fact that they had Len Casper and Jim DeShays calling games, because they're phenomenal. Their chemistry is incredible together. They're both top notch at what they do.
I always liked Jim because we always got a chance, and this was before the Astros made all their TV changes too, but back in the day, they would always, if the Rangers weren't on, Fox Sports would actually broadcast Houston games. So you would get a great, oh my gosh, the name is just missing in my mind. Astros fans are going to yell at me because
Bill Brown was he the guy?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Yeah.
So you had Bill Brown and Jim DeShays, and it was actually a pretty good combination. I actually enjoyed it. So to see him, and then I'm still mad that back in the day, and I feel like so old saying this, but being able to watch Cubs nationally televised games that were on WGN, Braves games nationally televised on TBS. So you get that sort of local and national exposure at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. And a big part of the Cubs fan base and why it's so gigantic is because of the superstation WGN back in the day.
Yep.
Harry Carey and Steve Stone broadcasting games in the afternoons from Wrigley Field. And so a large part of this fan base is used to the idea of that kind of access to TV games from our favorite team. And it's what made so many people into fans of the team to begin with. And now the marquee rollout, so much of the story with that was, we're not sure you're going to be able to see these games already. That pisses everybody off.
Well, yeah.
And then when you see what they do in terms of game presentation, a big problem with what they're doing with the way the network is run right now is they brought in a big broadcasting honcho from New York to kind of oversee the network rollouts. And he instilled the idea that he wants it to look like a national broadcast, like a professional Fox network game of the week. And nobody, and I mean nobody in Chicago or in the Cub fan base asked for that.
No. You don't. No, I don't know, and that's the problem. Like, these people that are making these decisions are the ones that they don't think like what the consumer wants, like what makes it what the consumers like. And so, no, the whole point of local, because to be honest, if you want to go watch a national game, you get that, let's say Monday, Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, you get that taste of there, and they get roasted every single time.
Yeah, who wants to see Matt Vasgersian broadcasting games for your team? Nothing against Matty, but well, I guess everything.
I mean, I don't know.
I mean, I could see a context where he'd be fine, but the current ESPN Sunday Night Baseball context ain't it. And that's the feel that the Cubs wanted, I guess. I've
listened to Matty V with the Padres, so I enjoyed that.
Mm-hmm. I think the problem with Matty V is that he spent the entire game complaining about new age stats like OBP, and yeah, that's an argument that was had 15 years ago and has been over for a decade. But what the Cubs would do, it felt like the entire marquee network was the victim of network executive notes, where everybody was trying to justify their position in the company by saying, okay, what if we added this? Wouldn't that be cool? And so you got so much unnecessary noise and fluff surrounding what should be just a straightforward game presentation with two of the best guys to do it. And it just kind of kept getting in the way, and sometimes insultingly so. Like, they had Mark Grace on as like a third wheel periodically, like once or twice a week, except because of the COVID restrictions, they would have him Zoom call in from his home bar in Arizona, because no better way to remind
that never works.
No, and especially not when, you know, he was a legendary drunk back in the day too. So at one point during just a random game in midseason, Len Casper steered him toward an anecdote involving one of his ex-wives and a car he'd parked in, I think, like Bud Selig's spot at Miller Park back in the day. And Mark Grace started telling the story, except he like randomly said, okay, and guys, I'm just going to go Archie Bunker here. So the dingbat. So first of all, you're starting with a pop culture reference from 1975 in your 2020 game broadcast. Second of all, you're starting a pop culture reference from a man who was known as a character who was known for his on-air bigotry and on-air sexism. And you're presenting it as, you know, fun, goofy banter. And that, more than anything, symbolized what Marquee Network was last year. So
I think the two games that I saw, there was like one that I actually paid attention to, I'll admit. The other one I just was like, had it on as background, was, I think it was game one against the Reds. I don't know if they had multiple doubleheader days, but it was the Darvish Bauer matchup in Cincinnati. So I could have sworn that Ryan Dempster was on there too.
Yes, Dempster would check in again twice a week. And Dempster actually was surprisingly decent to good, I'd say. Because we expect with Dempster, we know that he likes to be like, he's baseball funny, which means he's someone that baseball broadcasters say, this guy's hysterical. And then that means like he hits you in the face with shaving cream. But so we were expecting when they brought him into the booth, it would be like Harry Carey impressions and nonstop shtick. But he is able to kind of restrain that impulse.
A little bit more professional than you expected.
Yeah, very much so. Like, he gets a lot of flack in Chicago, but I was surprised at how much he brought when they would have him in. Now, it wasn't as much as Deshaies, and I don't think it's necessary to have him as a third guy in the booth. But if he's going to be there,
it could have been a lot worse.
Bringing something to the table.
Could have been a lot worse.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely could have been. It could have been. It could have been dropping slurs on the air, as we almost had with Mark Grace. So
it could have been 60 days of Mark Grace.
Yeah. Ugh, God. He was great as a player, but yeah, that didn't work at all.
Oh man.
Yeah. So I think where we're going here with this is so Mark, he already had the rocky rollout this season, and you could tell in my tone of voice as soon as you brought it up how sick we are of it. And then after the week that began with Theo Epstein announcing that he was stepping down as president, which we expected, but was still like, now we gotta, this kind of rips my heart out.
It's like the relationship where you know they're gonna break up with you, but even when they do it, you're just like, oh.
And you know that after you break up, you're still going to be hanging out outside their window occasionally, holding up a boombox playing In Your Eyes. But that was something we were at least mentally prepared for. It was still sad, but we were prepared for it.
Yeah.
Then a couple days later, they announced that they're cutting ties with Kyle Schwarber. And again, we understand somewhat from a baseball standpoint that, especially after the year he had last year, where we were hoping that he was kind of starting to come into his own as a hitter and then just kind of cratered again. There was a sense of, yeah, you could definitely keep him around if ownership was good, but at least we're, again, mentally prepared for it. And then at the end of that week, all of a sudden, like on a Thursday night, I got a text from my dad, is how I found out about this, saying, first Theo, then Schwarber, now Len Kasper. What? And so I logged on to Twitter at 11:30, like, okay, I guess Len Kasper has left the Cubs for some reason. And then you see Len Kasper is leaving the Cubs TV job to go to the White Sox radio booth.
Does that make it even worse?
Immensely, yes. And
I feel like the only thing that would have been worse, and I don't know, maybe this would be on the same terms, if he had left and went to the Cardinals.
Oh, yeah. Like, well, the thing about if you left and go to the Cardinals, like at least you don't have to hear him in the same town for 162 days a year.
So actually, this was the worst scenario.
Yeah, absolutely was. And no insult to Lenny for doing it. Like, I completely understand his reasoning for it, and actually, I think it's kind of admirable what he said about, radio is my passion, and I'm at a point in my life where I've gotten everything I've wanted out of my career. And now I want to see if I can do this. And this, if I can do this, will make me the most happy. I think that's incredibly self-aware. And as I say, it's a great quality to have. As a Cub fan, I can't pretend that I'm not hurt by it. Like it's a feeling that I can't control, but it's a feeling that's there. Partly because I wanted this to be like a forever thing with Lenny, where he was, especially because he was the guy in the booth in 2016, the year where all our dreams came true. And I wanted him to be like our generation's Harry Carey, and he's not, and that's his choice. So that does feel a little bit of a hurt. And I got to tell you, it's also telling that my first reaction upon seeing this news was F you, Tom Ricketts. And I again, completely 100% believe Len Kasper's reasoning that he tells us for this move. But as we've been discussing, 3 straight off seasons where the improvements have been non-existent, and it's just been one bit of frustrating news leading into bad news, after another. Even when there's a move that's completely out of his control, at some point it's just like, why can't we get a win on this team at this point? On a team in one of the biggest markets in the game, one of the most famous, most well-known teams in baseball, and this just keeps happening over and over and over again. And yeah, I'm tired of
it. I would say, coming from a small market area, well, and so it's so weird calling Dallas a small market.
Yeah, it shouldn't be.
For the Rangers, but it really is, because everything gets undershadowed based on, the Cowboys can sneeze and everybody's gonna fluff all over there. Raiders could win the World Series, but if the Cowboys make one little signing, that's gonna triumph.
Mhm.
And it's nice to see. I mean, even it was nice seeing the Dallas Stars going to the Stanley Cup, but then you're seeing over upcoming this next season, Stars get 4 nationally televised games across the season. They don't even have a nationally televised game against the Lightning.
Jeez.
And they play 8 times against them. Instead, NBC promotes the Blackhawks and Lightning.
Yeah, and that's going to be NBC's problem this year because the Hawks are going to be terrible.
They probably, I didn't check, but they probably have more nationally televised games than the Stars do.
Yeah, and the only thing they have probably more than nationally televised games is Team Legends missing out on the season. So
boom, boom, boom. There we go. But I mean, that's the point as far as like, I would somewhat take even what the Cubs sort of have now or sure Ranger fans would take sort of what the Cubs fans have now.
100%. Yeah. Let me just make sure to be clarify about my frustrations. This has been the best era of Cubs baseball in any living fan's lifetime. And when I look back on this era, it's going to be with incredible fondness. And my love for everybody on the 2016 team who is not the worst human being in the world is, I don't have the words to describe it as you're hearing in my voice right now. So believe me, I am very spoiled as a baseball fan, and I 100% recognize this. Where my frustration comes in is just in the sense that the players and certain parts of the team management that put the team together have really gone to the mat to try to make this into the best possible team it can be. And to extend the window as long as they can. And ownership is just not permitting them to be the best that they can be year to year on the field.
Right. If they leave, you ultimately want it to be because everybody just retires.
Yeah.
And just to be like, okay, they retire. Yes. Okay. That's personal choice.
And so the frustration in my voice is not at all with the team or with the on-field product, even though that they do disappoint in the playoffs occasionally, but that's, every team but one does every year. Where my frustration is almost 100% is with the ownership of this team. And I hope that that's something that you can understand and sympathize with as well.
Cowboys fans, can you understand what happens as far as owners go?
God, the man.
You just remember it can always.
What does Jerry Jones have more of? What does Jerry Jones have more of? New faces or new coaches?
Well, he's just thrilled that the Cowboys led the NFL in attendance.
Oh, good. Yeah, and in a year where 90% of the teams had 0. That's
Yep.
Well done, Jerry.
Yep.
That's.
And I believe it was like 14,000 more than second place.
Well, hey,
which was Jacksonville.
That's worth a 6-10 season, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And still lost the opportunity to the playoffs week 17.
Yeah, that's some Tribune Company ass thinking right there. That is legendary Cub ownership priority.
Welcome to Jerry World.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's something that so many of these awful people share, and yet we devote so much of our emotional energy to the teams they invest in. So
you're saying that based on the Cubs and the offseason they have, you still feel like they're at the top of the NL Central, essentially. I mean, let's just say by default.
Yeah, I was about to say by default. Like, I guess, like, considering that the Cubs are also the only team that signed anybody, that they've signed like 2 middle relievers during this offseason, and like they're the only team in the Central who's done that. I mean, otherwise the Cardinals haven't done a thing. The Reds are going to cut salary. They're going to lose Bauer. They're going to look to trade Sonny Gray. The Brewers, I think, might be starting another rebuild phase, and the Pirates.
I would actually say the Pirates are in a better position than the Brewers are.
The Pirates are scouting the California Penal League at this point.
I mean, teams like that, you got to kind of, in like 5-6 years, you kind of have to watch out for, because you could wind up putting together a Kansas City Royals, a Houston Astros, sort of. I don't want to say it's not dynasty, but like a great 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And so if Pittsburgh could get it right, and I say if they can get it right, then that's a dangerous. So I feel like if you're the Cubs, yeah, go for it.
Yes.
Try to win the division because again, if you're talking about 5-6 years, and if the Pirates do create a successful team, then they're going to shoot everybody else out of the water.
Right. And honestly, if it's 5 or 6 years down the road at that point, it's like, at some point I recognize the Cubs' natural contention window is going to end, and I just would prefer it's not sooner than it has to be. And 5-6 years down the road, of course, naturally it's going to close and another team is going to rise. And yeah, I just hope it's not the Cardinals, honestly.
No. And I kind of see where, as far as the Rangers go, hopefully in the next 3-4 years, when you look at everybody else in that division, because I never know what's going to happen with Oakland. Oakland Athletics, you always feel like they're going to go turmoil, and they just have one successful season after another. Does Seattle? I have no idea what Seattle. I mean, Seattle does have some good young players.
Yeah, they're finally starting to get some hitters into their pipeline. Like Kyle Lewis is legit good.
Oh yeah, no, he's that Kyle Seager, Kyle Lewis combination is pretty good, but the other seven
still a ways away. Yeah.
The Angels, I have no idea what the Angels. I mean, I feel bad for Mike Trout. I really do.
It's so bad. It's such the worst thing. Like, you were gifted with the transcendent star of this generation, like what every team who's trying to build a contender would kill for, and you just have no idea what to do around him. And every move you make seemingly makes it worse.
And then the Houston Astros feel like they're deteriorating because the main guys that they have, they're gaining value and they can't afford them.
Oh no, what a shame.
I know.
Oh, that's just dreadful. Those poor guys. That poor.
We all have to say our prayers for the Houston Astros.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I scream them directly into a trash can every day.
I have. I don't know what the Texas Ranger. Oh man, I'm almost curious to see first home game against Houston Astros.
Like, there are going to be guys in the ballpark at Texas who are just going to walk around banging trash cans, right? Like, that's got to be a thing whenever the Astros visit.
I don't know if the Rangers marketing team can actually do this, but they really should have like some sort of first 10,000. Like, plastic trash cans cost what? Like $5?
Yes. Oh yeah.
I think you could spend $10,000 on plastic trash cans, or maybe even those little tiny ones.
You want to get on ESPN or national TV? That's one way to get attention. If Bill Beck were still owning a team, like, there wouldn't be a second thought. Of course, it'd be trash can night.
Or like the King's Court, back when Felix Hernandez was with the Mariners. Mm-hmm. The Astros come to town. You have like I can't think of a name that would fit that.
You got to have Sesame Street and have Oscar the Grouch throw out the first pitch.
Like in the middle, but then around there you have a whole bunch of people just banging on trash cans.
Yes. My God.
I don't know what you would call that. I can't think of a clever name.
Well, the landfill, I think.
There you go. Or let me rephrase that. I can't. That's actually pretty good, because some of the other names I was thinking of, I don't think you can get by with it.
Well, but those are all names the Houston Astros have earned at this point.
Yep. The banging asterisks.
God, I never realized how much I loathed that organization until they got to the ALCS last year. Like, once they beat the A's, I was like, oh God, this needs to be stopped.
No, I know. And for a team that finished below 500 and made the postseason,
and that added on to it too. That of course they would finish below 500 and then try to make another run to a championship.
I mean, at least with the Milwaukee Brewers, even though they finished under 500, they still did win by default of second place. Mm-hmm. They were just the 8th best team in the National League.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean,
there was nothing symbolic about that. They were just kind of mediocre, and then because they took 8 teams, somebody had to show up and get pounded by the Dodgers. But yeah, to see the Astros just kind of looking like they were going to mow through the league with an under 500 team would have been the most 2020 baseball story possible.
Thank you, Tampa Bay Rays. I know with Kevin Cash, he's been criticized, and I know the Rays have been criticized, but we were all Tampa Bay Rays fans.
They were saints that night in Game 7. Yeah.
But no, I'm glad the rest of the world gets to experience the dislike of the Houston Astros like the Texas Rangers fans.
Oh yeah, and it's going to be interesting this year when they start the season. At some point, there are going to be fans back because I don't think they're going to start the season without some way of finding ways to get fans in the ballpark, which seems rash, but okay, let's just assume that. But it's going to be interesting to see how much of that animus carries over into this season.
Because fans didn't get their opportunity.
Right.
They want their opportunity.
Like, and you saw like Dodger fans were camping out in the parking lot to greet that bus as it came.
They do play. I have to see the schedule, but I believe they do play. The Astros and Dodgers do play.
I hope so. Baseball has to find a way to make that happen this year.
Yeah, Rangers, AL West and NL West play. I have to see when they do play.
Yeah.
And where. Goodness, I hope it is Dodger Stadium.
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're in charge of baseball's schedule, that should be the biggest slam dunk of
well, the year. if you're in charge of baseball schedule, well, honestly, if you're in charge of baseball schedule, I nitpicked this with a couple people last year and this year, but it really shouldn't be AL West, NL West in those. It really should have just basically adopted last year's pre-COVID schedule.
Yeah.
If you want my nitpick on there.
Sure. I mean, yeah, if we're going into details like that, I mean, I would like no interleague play at all. So that's.
I would like interleague play. So this is where you and I collide, but.
Sure. Yeah, I am.
But I think if you're going to do, you played your respective interleague, West, Central, East. So I figure you've got that out of the way. Go with the division you didn't face last year, and then just keep the pattern going.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that keeps it fresh for the fans too, and it also, I mean, it's interesting with the Cubs because that interleague games are probably the closest outside of the Cardinals series that we get to other teams' fans taking over Wrigley Field the way we do so many other ballparks. Because when a team like the Blue Jays, for example, only comes to Wrigley maybe once every 3, sometimes maybe every 5 years, and such a destination, like the fans descend. Like the Blue Jays played the Cubs like 3 years ago, and it might have been 50-50. It felt like a little bit. It's like they were loud. I was impressed by how Blue Jays fans traveled.
Well, yeah, I can see there, but I mean, not so much. Well, I guess you're talking about Blue Jays, but what about like Rays?
Oh yeah,
probably not gonna get. I mean,
and that's.
I feel like the Blue Jays are a higher market than people realize.
Yeah, and they're also Canada's team too at this point. So you've got an entire country behind them, and it's also an incredibly big city.
And now they're Buffalo's team.
Yeah, yes, that's right. Yeah, the Canada's team that can't quite make it into Canada. But,
still wondering if that is going to be the case.
At least for the start of the year, you got to imagine. Yeah. Until the vaccine becomes prevalent enough where you see it having.
Or you wonder if they just, instead of just saying, "Oh, halfway through the year, you can go play at Rogers Center," just for 2021, just play in Buffalo for the entire year.
They should probably assume that. Yeah.
Make it consistent.
Yeah, I don't know how long it's going to take for travel restrictions to open up, given how bad the situation's been in our country for so long.
We shall see. All right. It was fun, Ken. It was real fun.
Great to talk to you, Alex.
We got what, about a month and 2 weeks until the start. And everybody, I know there's been some reports where it may be delayed. I'm seeing it 50-50. There are reports saying it's starting on time. Will it start with fans? My theory is that if anything, it is going to start on time. The only thing is they may not start in their respective spring training facilities. They may be the same as summer camp last year, where they'll just play in their own ballparks, but be ready for the regular season starting in the first week of April.
If you can do anything to make it more controllable, I'm in favor.
And I think if there's nothing like outrageous as far as COVID goes in the next 3 months, I can't see why, especially the Southern teams, they can have fans. I mean, you can't go from Globe Life Field having 11,000 for the postseason and then all of a sudden be like, nope, when there hasn't. Well, Texas is always in an outbreak, but nobody seems to care. So
Yeah, and that's the problem with everything right now. So, yeah.
And where can folks want to follow you?
Oh, yes.
Social media.
So on Twitter, I am at Ken Schultz _, and on Instagram at Ken Thin Guy. My podcast is every Friday on the Outsports Podcast Network. Just search Outsports and you'll find it there every Friday. And my colleagues post great podcasts throughout the week, every other day. So it's been a pleasure talking, Alex. Great to see you again.
Absolutely. For more Rangers coverage, you go to DallasSportsFanatic.com/Texas/Rangers. And if you want to listen to this podcast and other podcast episodes, they're on YouTube. They'll also be available on Apple, Google, and Anchor podcasts. And you can follow me on Twitter at @APlinkTX. Ken, have a great off season, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully everything will be on track. And hopefully the Cubs and Rangers will be entering Arizona in the next month and a half.
Nothing would please me more, man. And nothing has pleased me more than talking to you.
Have a great one, and stay safe, everybody out there.